Okay, you must all be thinking, I think you did a pretty good job at energizing people, right? But post-lunch, we have tax as a concept, it's pretty boring. In fact, there's a saying which goes as well, right? Like, while doing taxes, even accountants need coffee to do their work, right? But let me promise you that, it's not going to be that boring. When you combine AI with tax, a lot of interesting things happen in life, right? And we'll walk you through, like you said, it's a practitioner's view, so a few solutions, etc., which we have, put into production, right? So, just a bit of a background to what you see on the slide, right? I've been in the technology, industry for about 17 years, with AI for about 7 years. I solve a, whole list of problems across industries and functions, right? But when you get to tax, right, the problems are entirely different, with the sheer volumes of unstructured data, the subjectiveness which goes into every query which comes in, and the chain of thought of analysis which needs to go into it. It is just mind-boggling. Right? So most of the time which a tax consultant will spend is analyzing the query firstly. Let's say you ask a question, is this liable for taxes and so on. Understand the question, go through volumes of data. Imagine going through like, 40, 50,000 odd documents, humanly not possible, right? And whatever they can, they do, and then they come up with a conclusion which finally gets reviewed and then gets sent to a client, right? Now, with the solutions, what you will see later is essentially all of the number crunching and all of the data crunching is essentially what you let AI handle, and then you be the reviewer of an outcome of AI, which essentially means that you get more time to do two things, right? To be able to identify risk patterns, because you're giving a conclusion at the end of it, into identify what are the risk possibles. You can look at out of the box scenarios, and then look at it more from a technical research standpoint as well, instead of spending your time in data crunching. Right? Let me take an example again. Right? Let's say any of you have got like an tax query or kind of like a dispute or anything on international taxations from an enterprise standpoint, right? Uh, One will need to go through all of these distinct documents, which are there, not only from an India context, from a global context. Imagine the complexities which goes into it, right? And finally, you're giving an advice, and that advice essentially holds good, right? Uh, there are a lot of risks which a human, advice can have, which essentially they may not have gone through a certain case law, which has been passed, which was missed, and hence what could happen is that basis the advice given, you know, cases can be won or lost basis on certain points being missed by humans, right? And that's in a sense where we say that an AI can look through such voluminous amount of data, and especially from a Gen AI standpoint, where you can query on a natural language and be able to get certain insights from it, and not only get insights as well, right? But in terms of you'll see some solutions wherein it's also generating certain questions which you can ask as a revert question back to the clients as well, right? The first case in point is, let's assume you have transactional data, something like general ledger entries. The objective is you need to understand what is not in line with your past behavior, right? Now, what you will see is that essentially a solution wherein you can upload your past transactions, upload the ledger entries wherein you want to identify anomalies, and to be able to essentially say at a transaction level, why is something which is an anomaly, um, you know is it because of something mentioned in the text, is it because of you know uh, because of a certain category. All of the red flags are essentially being identified, right? The UI, etc., I mean, from a consumption pattern, can be anything, right? But the fundamental large language model, behind this works without having to train on any of your past data, right? So it's able to look through the comments, identify, reason within the comments, and be able to flag out at a transactional level, what is coming as an anomaly, Right? Now, you can apply this, we've applied this from a tax standpoint, but you can apply this across any function, any your day-to-day work wherein you need to identify outliers as well, within what you do. Right? Uh, Another common case in a tax domain is that you have notices. I'm sure. Not a lot of you have got the unfortunate incident of getting a notice from the income tax department, which is never good in any case. But let's say you get a notice, right? And based on proven data, uh, what we see is that a majority of the notices, essentially, there is something wrong with the authenticity of it, right? And there are certain checks which every accountant does, from the data or from the notice which is provided, right? Now, imagine that now this solution was able to go through all of that, which is essentially, again, data crunching work. Some of it is rule-based, some of it is judgment, but, extracting information out of that unstructured data. That's in a sense, what we call as a, notice validation AI solution, which is again built on a foundational LLM model as well. Right? Fine. Let's take one last example. Right? Let's say you are analyzing a financial statement of a company, which some of you may have done before investing in stocks and stuff like that as well. Right? You must have seen that when a report comes in, it goes into 30, 40 pages of, just the financial information, which is without even the context and all of the priorities of the company is taken into account, right? Now, there are certain checks, risk checks, etc., which needs to be done, discrepancies which needs to be identified in the financial statements, which takes a tax consultant like anywhere between 3 hours to like 1.5, 2 days, right? Just to go through that, go through those 30, 40 pages, arrive at, what sort of transactions are, as an exception, what should be the follow-up question because something is mentioned in the transactions. Now, that is something which they do outside of the analysis. Now, what the solution does is essentially not only be able to flag out saying which are the risky entries, but also to be able to, say that this should be the follow-up question because this has been flagged as well, right? So what typically took like, 1.5, 2 days, or even 3 days in some cases, is now done in a matter of few seconds or minutes, right? Now, what the tax consultant could do, the job is not over, right? Because now you have an outcome. Now the accountant typically spends validating this. Instead of spending, 2 days, probably spend a couple of hours and then send this out to a client. Okay? Thank you for being such a patient audience.